This story begins in the winter of 1999 when I received a package of letters from Steve Griggs and his sister Diane in New Jersey.
The man I was raised to believe was my father did commit numerous crimes. He was a thief, a liar, a rapist, a sadistic torturer, and a murderer. He practiced all of these things on his wife and children.
They claimed that 40 years ago, as young children, they went on journeys with their father and witnessed him committing murders.
A lot of them looked at me just before they died. They wondered if we had helped to lure them into this position where they were about to lose their life.
This is a story of evil. It's about how people deal with horrendous experiences. Police in several states, a county prosecutor and his detectives, and myself, an investigative filmmaker, all get drawn into a mystery of horrific memories, but a puzzling lack of hard evidence, and a father accused of being a serial killer who denies everything. My investigation only ends with a visit to the house of Steve Griggs Sr. and an extraordinary confrontation.
I am so determined because in my belief as a child, nobody told him it was wrong. The nuns and the priests are the closest thing to God, and they tell him it's wrong. Then he'll stop, and we can live a normal life, and it'll all be over with.
One of the most pitiful sights I've ever seen is this idiot trying to drag two dead men through the rain and 6-inch deep mud, slipping and falling, cursing in the rain. That's my dad.
I have a portrait on my wall. He's a serial killer.
The first time I set out to meet Steve and Diane, I was torn. On the face of it, here was a story of boundless evil, spreading out from a family to infect many other lives. Yet as I left New York with my film crew to drive to New Jersey, I was also aware that this may not be the explanation at all. Steve and Diane had written to me in England after seeing a documentary of mine on American television. These letters were certainly compelling. It was hard to deny the emotions behind their words. But their letters also referred to recovered memories. So how could I be sure that what they now remembered is what actually occurred? Certainly those letters had conveyed such an all-pervading sense of evil perpetrated in a family that my journey along the quiet back roads of New Jersey now seemed full of foreboding.
What am I?
First stop was Steve's place, where he lives with his wife Anne-Marie and runs a fencing business from his house. Steve began by telling me how, 4 years ago, after his mother died, he started to remember that he'd been sexually abused by his father.
I figured, hey, I've been abused. I've been really treated badly. This has been messing me up. I want to be a better husband to my wife. I'm not going to let anything stand in the way of that. So I'll find a psychologist who deals with this, and I'll get this out of the way. It took 3 weeks, and I started remembering the murders.
Steve's sister Diane is a widow who lives just a few miles from Steve with her teenage daughter. What triggered the memories of the killings?
Stephen said that he remembered that my father had killed somebody, and when he said that, it was as if he said, I remembered Dad bought a new car. I wasn't shocked, I wasn't startled, and I just listened to what he had to say. And then things started to come back for me. I could be standing in a supermarket, I could be watching television, I could be sleeping, and it would come back to me. And I started to remember, and the first thing I remembered was about the bag under the house. And Stephen comes over to me and he whispers in my ear, "There's a lady in the bag."
Steve told his mother about the body.
And then he said to her, "I felt her leg. It's shaved." When my father came home, she starts yelling and raging at him, "Whatever it is, get it out from under the house."
My initial reaction on hearing that their memories surfaced so recently is to wonder how we can trust them. Dr. Laurie Mader is a criminologist who's investigated repressed memory.
Stephen and Diane have very intricate stories. there may be elements of truth to that. I have trouble believing that all the details are as accurate as they say. They were young when these things happened, and if they separated themselves psychologically from the incidents, then how can they remember the most minute details?
Both Steve and Diane were brought up as Catholics.
The first thing that people ask is, why didn't you tell before? And we did tell before. We're going over the 10 Commandments, and they get to the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And I raised up my hand and I said to the nun, well, what about if you're a soldier? And she said, well, soldiers aren't allowed to kill either. It's against God, you'll go to hell, but they can get a special dispensation from the Pope. And I said, well, what about if your father's a soldier and he's killing women and children here in your town? And that's when it was like, now she's after me because she can't believe there's no belief here. I'm a troublemaker. And she grabs me and then she says to me, we're going to have to go tell the priest. Are you willing to tell the priest what you're telling me? And I said, yes. And she says, you're going to go to hell if you're lying.
And what does the prosecutor in New Jersey, who is coordinating this investigation, make of it all?
The allegations that we have before us are serious allegations, if true. And we assigned Detective John Diet from our office to interview Mr. Griggs, take his information, and follow it up. Because, again, in regards to the detail he provided, to us, it had a ring of credibility. And a person who engaged in that activity would be a truly evil person. And certainly, from our perspective, it would be a person that we would want to bring to justice.
Say, for instance, you come up with further information during the course of us making this film. Would we be able to have access to that? And if we come up with something?
I think at this point, yes. It's in our mutual interest to determine the truth. Truth in regards to our perspective of if someone is responsible for horrible criminal acts, that they are held accountable for their acts. From your perspective, to find out whether or not the information provided to you is the truth or fabrication.
So we could have a two-way street here.
Let's have a two-way street.
Now I was getting further and further drawn in to the impact of pure evil on a family.
The problem is that he has been getting rid of evidence all his life, all of this. When we would go down to visit our grandmother, we had to stop at garbage cans off of the turnpike in the parkway. He would always have a bag or two that he had to throw away along the way.
This is the steps going down into the basement. He's dug, he's filled in, he's built walls, torn the walls down, tunneled. Sure enough, I found he had broken through the foundation, cut a door through the foundation, and dug another room. Instead of writing, I just called the police and I told them, look, he's dug a room in his basement. I know this guy, I know what that room is for. Now he's staking himself out around the neighborhood. Somebody's got to do something. His wife is gone, my brother's in California, he's all alone. What's going to happen is you're going to wind up with a dead boy in the weeds, and it's going to be in your town.
If you started to not react, if you didn't get this grimace on your face, or you didn't cringe, or you didn't show any emotion, then he had to take it a step further. Oh, okay, they don't believe me. Let's go for a Sunday drive. And then we would drive, and he would stop, and he'd say, who's buried there? What's there? And if you told him, you got the punch in the kidney, and if you didn't tell him, you got the punch in the kidney. It was like no-win situation.
Most of Steve and Diane's memories relate to the early 1960s when they were young children. In 1959, their father, a veteran of World War II, was working at the Fort Devens Army base close to the town of Ayer in Massachusetts. He was a sergeant and worked as a cook in the mess hall on the base. They say that one afternoon in 1960, he took the son of another cook on a picnic, an African-American boy whose name was Jimmy. He was also Diane's friend.
My father asked Jimmy, if he wants to drive the car. You know, Jimmy's like real excited about this. He's real excited about the car, and my father gets him in the car, and he makes it so that Jimmy's sitting behind the wheel, but he's got his foot on the gas and his hand, and he's shifting, and you know, it's like he's Jimmy's little kid. He's driving, and then he says, "Okay, now you're going to have to pay for driving the car." And Jimmy's like, "Well, I don't have any money. How am I going to pay for it?" And I could hear that glove compartment open when Jimmy started to cry. "It's hurt, you're hurting me, you're hurting me." And he opened the glove compartment because he always kept a tube of Vaseline in there. And he took the Vaseline out, and then he says, "Does that feel better? Is that better? You like this, you like this, you know you like this."
This place has come back to me in my dreams, in my nightmares, and for years and years. It just came back so much, and I could never place it. My dad parked right about here and took Jimmy and put him into this brick pump house.
My father puts on this really deep, evil, mean voice, and he says to him, "Your father doesn't care about you. Your father says to do anything I want with you. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care if you die." And Jimmy just really starts screaming. Then he starts hitting Stephen and messing with his head and pushing him around, and he hands him a knife and he tells him to attack Jimmy. And he just keeps telling me, "He's trying to hurt his sister. He's going to hurt all of us. He's going to hurt your family." Pretty soon Stephen he can't do anything, but he just like strikes out at him, and it hits Jimmy in the shoulder back here. The knife hits him, and he's shocked, and he's backed off. And "Why did you do that to me?" Stephen's like, no, I can't do this." And so my father grabs him and he says, "You won't do it, well, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. If you can't take care of your sister and protect your mother and your family." And he drags him over, and he picks him up, and he throws him down into this hole with water in it. And he's screaming, and you can hear the water rushing. And then he looks at me, and he says, "Do you want to trade places with him? Do you want to be the one in the well? Do you want to be the one to die? Because one of you's got to die." There wasn't anything that I could do about it. And we drove off, and whether he was still alive or not, I can still hear that little boy screaming.
The rules are all wrong. Anything goes around here.
Listening to their account, no one I've met on this investigation doubts that Steve and Diane believe they witnessed Jimmy's murder 40 years ago. But their word alone is not enough to convince the authorities. They need corroboration. 40 years ago, not every child that went missing was reported to the police, and many police files from that time have been lost or destroyed. Steve and Diane are determined to find proof that Jimmy lived and died, but their memories are hazy after 40 years. They do not even know Jimmy's last name or which house he lived in.
How do you know how to make your next move? There's no rule book, there's no class to take, there's nothing to follow, so you're going by your gut instincts and this driving, motivating force. It's got to be up back in this section, one of these 3 streets.
We're trying to zero in on any members of the black community that might remember this boy's name. We think his first name was Jimmy.
His grandmother lived in town, so we figured the best place to look was the churches.
And were you associated with the...
Yes, I knew the little boy. I was there the day that he was murdered. But because we have such limited information, we don't have a name. Because we're looking for a particular cook. We don't know his name, but he was a black man. He was quite big, maybe from the South.
We checked out the addresses and names that Steve and Diane came up with, and checked through military records, and have yet to find any evidence of Jimmy's family's existence at Fort Devens in the early 1960s. But Sergeant Mark Coulter of the Ayr Township Police also checked out Steve Griggs' account of Jimmy's story.
Are there two pump houses down there? Yes, there are. Was there a well there? I wasn't aware there was, but when we checked, we did find a well adjacent to it. We looked in the well, didn't find any evidence of clothing or anything of that type. So, bottom line to his information, his description of the areas and the maps that he drew are absolute. He is right on target with the locations and what's there and what used to be there. But checking those areas, we still came up with nothing to prove his stories.
If one person sits somewhere who has not been through what we have been through and says, well, right here proves if you can get this wrong, then you could get everything wrong. But they didn't sit. They didn't sit in the back seat of that car. They didn't sit outside that well. They weren't sitting there or standing there when these things happened. And we were.
Hi, how you doing? How are you?
Ayr is the nearest town to Fort Devens. Steve and Diane have an appointment to see the police chief.
Come on in.
Here's a map that pinpoints several murders my father committed, and this is the way he was spreading them out. All these people are dead. I saw it, and I have the article.
Okay, well,
There was a crime
what about
spree.
the people in there? There are articles there are people missing.
Right.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, but my interest is in air.
Right.
So you have, you know, half a dozen or so alleged murders, and we have nobody missing, no bodies, no physical evidence that this occurred. He killed a little black boy. We don't have a missing black boy. That's where we are with this right now. Would love to be able to help you and find some of these people that were murdered, but we haven't discovered anything yet that would lead us to believe that any of these things happened.
Steve and Diane claim that one of the people that their father killed at Fort Devens in the early 1960s was an Army champion swimmer.
Searching for the lake that my father lowered a dismembered medalist swimmer into. This is a topographical map. I've pinned out everything that could have something to do with it. At this point, I know which ones are going to be too small, which ones are too large. Just like anything else, if you keep hitting it and hitting it, eventually you'll get there.
We could always learn to scuba dive.
If that's what I have
Down
to do.
it.
Yeah, if that's what I have to do, it'll take time. And I have to earn the money for the scuba gear.
This is the Fort Devens swim hall. They claim it is the last place that the swimmer was seen alive. The swim hall has now turned to rubble.
We drove up and we sat, and the swimmer came out of the place, and he walked over by the car and was walking towards the back. He had a car or something back there, and my father had his window open. He said, hey buddy, can you come here? Can you come here? And the guy was kind of reluctant, but he started coming over, and he said, look, I got my daughter here. We came down to see you swim, and we missed you. And I tried to make my face as ugly as I could possibly make it. I thought if I can make myself as ugly as possible, he won't get in the car. And he thought that I was that upset, and something in him just made him get in the car. And we went to go to get Stephen.
When I got in the car, I whispered in this guy's ear. I said, he's gonna kill you. My dad went to grab his head, but the guy was ready for him, and they were like this, and this guy held my father off, and I was so proud of him, and I was so proud of myself. I had warned him, and this guy had fought off my father. Now the two of them are leaning against the doors and are breathing really heavy, and now my father starts in with the brainwashing stuff. Okay, what happens now? Why do we just sit here like this? I'll tell you what, we'll get out of the car, we'll have a fair fight, and the winner takes all. He drives away with the car. And the guy says, a fair fight, right? So he got out of the car, and my dad immediately reached over, locked the door, took the keys out of the ignition, and ran around the front of the car, grabbed the 2x4 and smashed the guy's head in. Hit him like 8 times really fast. There's a lot more to it, but we wound up going to a lake, and my dad had cut him up, and we went out on a really small rowboat, and my dad wired rocks to his body parts and lowered his parts into the water. And as he lowered each part, he made a little speech, and as the part disappeared, he said, "This is your memory. As these parts disappear into the water, so does your memory. The only thing you will ever remember is that you must never turn against me." And I sat there, I was behind my father, and I thought, if I can take my belt off real quietly, I could strangle him, but the belt is too thick, it won't dig in enough. And I wish that if I had just had the presence of mind to have made and kept my own garrote on me, that was one time when I could have got him. I could have got that garrote on him. I could have taken a deep breath and pulled with all my might and fell over, and the boat would have gone over. He'd be dead in the water, and then I could swim to shore, and it would be over there. And well, that's one guy that I don't know if any of his bones could still be at the bottom of the lake or if they could be found, but that's one guy that my dad couldn't go back and dig up. It made the paper, and I've been reading microfilms from those days.
Did you find it?
I haven't found him yet. I started reading the Boston Herald in '59, and I'm into 61.
After hearing the story of the champion swimmer, I began to fear that Steve and Diane's minds were playing terrible tricks.
The most blatant thing is the number of them that were disappearing. He was putting away so many young GIs or soldiers that they thought they had some sort of communist terrorist action going on. So they were giving the guys talks, gathering them together, telling them, don't go anywhere alone, always make sure somebody knows where you're going. We don't know what's happening to these guys, but we know something's going on.
Steve, I think you're getting carried away.
Okay.
Because I don't think you know that. How could you know that?
He was coming home. He was coming home laughing about it, bragging about it. And meanwhile, he's sitting in there trying to hold back his laughter. And he's saying, who would ever think that a mess hall, somebody who works in a mess hall, could put an entire military base on alert? I know it's
you have to be sort of careful, because given that you're relying on your memory, and given that this wasn't in your conscious memory until quite recently.
No, it was always there. It just got blocked out.
Because you're saying a lot about what your father said.
Let me say this about that.
I should be careful about that, because it may just be that your memory is expanding, or you're feeding your memory.
Since Steve and Diane recovered memories of the murders, they've been recording the memories onto a chart for the police. It details the dates, places, motives for a long and growing list of murders.
And through the years, which now has been 97 to 2000, it has grown dramatically from 6 cases to 20 cases to 40 cases, now to 70 cases that his father may have been involved in. We also have determined that some of what he's told us is not true, or he did not have the facts correct.
Some of Steve's recent memories were triggered by news stories of murder that he has connected to his father. A recent press story in New Jersey covered a 1966 case involving the murder of a boy called Paul Bender.
I took the article and I went over to Stevens, and he also had the article, and he just kept saying, "This is the boy. He did this. This is the boy." And I was like, "Steven, we can't just go and say something. We weren't there. I know we weren't there when the boy was murdered." And he kept saying, "This is the boy." Over the next couple of days, these memories came back to me. These memories have been in my mind, but I just didn't connect them with anything. But it's always been this whole memory of this day. And I started writing it down, everything that I could possibly think of. in case there was just something, anything that would connect it. And then we drove up here.
When they got to Union Beach that day, they remembered that their father had taken them there and told them how he'd killed Paul Bender.
Not one cop has spoken to us about the death of murder of Paul Bender to this day.
For Steve and Diane, the Paul Bender case is their chance to demonstrate something they know to be true. For the police, it's an opportunity to test memories against known facts.
A horrific crime, a horrific death of this young boy. And I think that's why we are still actively pursuing this case. If Mr. Griggs has information that helps us solve it, then that would be a great thing. If he's providing us information simply out of some type of personal motive, then that would be something equally horrible. So I think we'll have to find that out. We know where the body was found. It's been reported where the body is found. We know how the boy was killed. We know that the boy was subject to a degree of torture. Some of the information that we have in this particular file has not been released to the press, and that's the important aspect. That's the keys that would determine, from our perspective, whether or not the information being supplied by Mr. Griggs is relevant and accurate, or simply being regurgitated from news accounts of this horrible incident.
Did he say how he suffered, what he did to him?
He mentioned about the burns, and he mentioned about the stick.
What did he say about the burns?
He said that he burnt the little boy.
Did he say how he burnt him?
Not to my memory.
Did your father actually show you what he done to Paul?
And he came up out of the basement with a handkerchief and showed something to my mother, and she gasped and said, "Get that out of here, get that out of the house." And he's laughing, he's real happy, and he says, "I'm trying to figure out how to preserve it. Look, it's shrunk up like a button. It's not like a piece of leather, it looks like a penis that has shrunk up so that it's just about flat, like a button." This is one especially sick individual. I do have memories of being very young myself, and the guy comes up to me and he's got a knife and he grabs my penis and he wants to cut. He's saying that I'm going to cut your penis off.
He indicated that his father had taken a trophy from the body of Paul Bender. Well, that's absolutely not true. That is absolutely not true. I mean, we have pictures still from that homicide scene which clearly indicate that the information initially provided was false. We will await the laboratory analysis of the clothing and the materials we've submitted in the Paul Bender case, in that specific case, in the hopes that we have some hard evidence that will either definitely exclude or in the possibility to include Mr. Griggs Sr. in the homicide.
After the Bender case, I'm definitely questioning Steve's credibility, but yet still puzzled that he and Diane seem so convinced that they actually witnessed these events. I went to see Skip Simpson, an expert in recovered memory and a lawyer who has acted for both the prosecution and the defense in such cases.
I've had cases very similar to this case where a family allegedly, when I say a family, I'm actually talking about two sisters who allegedly saw their father take a baseball bat, kill a man in front of the whole family, and of two other brothers and the mother, and then put the dead man into a bathtub and cut him up into many pieces, put water in there, and now force the children's hand into the water. It turned out that it could not be substantiated, okay? There was no evidence of anyone dying. Everyone looked. The police were notified. The police investigated and
couldn't find that any of this occurred. Not only couldn't find that that occurred, but a lot of other things that the two sisters said also. They couldn't find that it occurred. The sisters believed it desperately. One was so upset by it all that she hung herself. Those same sort of themes were in Steve and Diane's case.
We were also concerned in regards to whether or not some of the information provided to us was delusion or fabrication to the point of a concern for either his safety or the safety of others. And we still have that concern that he truly believes what he is telling us is the truth.
First you find somebody that you're going to kill, somebody that won't be missed, somebody that nobody cares about. Then you dig your hole. Then you, as you stalk that person, make friends with them, try to get them off to the side, you go back and check on your hole where you've taken the dirt and thrown it away because the body's going to fill it up. Then you, when you get the person, you kill them, you bring them there, you put them in a hole, you fill it up, and you're out of there in 5 minutes. You go establish an alibi. I've seen him out in the blazing sun with a white shirt and an army shovel bent at a 90-degree angle with this maniacal energy just tearing away at the ground. You never seen anybody work like that.
He may be more like his father than he thinks, and that may be very scary to him. And that may be one of the reasons why he's so focused on getting back at his father.
If Steve is scared of being like his father, others are scared of Steve.
A couple of times when we were out, just the three of us, looking at a wooded area away from a public road or away from houses where we were alone. Yeah, I was uneasy, and I always made sure that they were in front of me and not behind me. Call it the creeps, call it whatever you want. After a while, you just become uneasy when things haven't panned out the way you'd hoped that you would find something.
But Steve's wife, Anne-Marie, who he married 5 years ago, shares none of these concerns.
I said to him, you know, we're walking one day, and I said, Stephen, you know, when I went out with you, when I first went out with you, you are a really good person. I saw that. You know, he's, for me, he's not highfalutin. He's just who he is. And this is a stumbling block. We got married in May of 96, and this started coming out in October of 96. Those first few months were really stressful. Now it's, you know, it's a way of life. This is his work. I'll go to work during the day, and this is what he works on. And then we do things together, you know, the weekends. You know, it's not a 24-hour thing.
I found a secret compartment in the backyard.
In a bizarre twist, Steve's obsession with his father has led him to start digging in his own backyard.
Just goes to show you never know what's in your backyard, especially if you got some dirtbag who's looking to hide things. Like my old man.
We live in a cemetery. Cold and barren place. And science runs with us. Making us gods.
Has it changed your relationship, this?
Well, I mean, I can think of so many other things to be doing besides this. You know, it gets weary after a while. You know, he carries a ball, and in the beginning, you know, it's a concrete ball, and you carry it, and you keep chipping away at it. And I hope that one day, not I hope, I know that it's gonna, the concrete ball turn into a balloon, you know, and just kind of float there.
Yeah, this is it right here.
Steve and Diane have spent most of the summer searching for the lake where they remember their father dumping the body parts of the murdered Army swimmer. Now they believe they've found the right lake. Steve decides to test the truth of his memory by memorializing and measuring the spot.
Of course, as a kid, the lake looked a lot bigger than it does now. So I was thinking that maybe it was 50 to 100 feet deep or something. So at this point it's shallow enough where he could have come back with his snorkeling fins and got some of them, but I don't think he would have gotten all of them. That's up to the police to decide after 40 years.
As an individual comes and speaks to you and provides you information, you listen to what they say and you say, is this crazy? With Mr. Griggs, he would present himself in a sane and rational manner. Whether or not there is underlying psychological conditions that are masked, well, that would be for a psychiatrist or a psychologist to tell us.
Did Steve and Diane suffer from real sadistic abuse and witness murders? Or have their memories distorted the abuse they suffered and transformed it in their minds into murder? I turned to memory and trauma expert Dr. Daniel Brown to help us find the answers. Steve and Diane agreed to undergo a series of tests under his direction. When Diane was being tested, she relived her experiences so powerfully that her physical reactions could be measured.
Your heart rate rose almost 40 beats per minute, which is quite a spike. Your muscle tension level rose significantly, and the skin conductance also rose significantly. Diane, I have no doubt from the testing that you clearly are suffering from post-traumatic stress. You clearly have been severely traumatized.
Right.
That's fact. That's absolutely clear. I could find nothing in the testing that would account for the source of that post-traumatic stress other than your report about the experiences with your father.
Dr. Brown's tests showed that as a result of the traumas they've experienced, Diane's memories become confused, whereas Steve fills in the gaps of his memory.
That could be worded another way. It could be said that since the trauma of these murders has messed you up, you're no longer a good witness because you're messed up by what you saw.
And that's a clear possibility.
Yeah.
That one of the unfortunate things here that certainly can happen in general is that people are traumatized and abused, and for other reasons there are things that would cause some questioning of the credibility of their reports, even though they were genuinely traumatized and abused, but the standard of the court then would not allow that, you see.
Right. So
even though you may have been abused.
That's why we're approaching it this way. There is a trail of murders. We can show the trail of murders. We're telling about it. And really, isn't it somebody else's job to prove this? I still care for my father. I want to help this guy. And the best thing I can do to help him is to confront him with the truth so he can deny it and go to hell if there is a hell. And that's exactly what he needs for what he's done. That's the best I can do for him. I'm not trying to get even with my father. How do you get even with a guy who's done this? There's thousands and thousands of people whose lives have been affected by this.
My advice to both of you is that with the uncertainty of what we know about memory in general, you may never get the kind of certainty that you want about what happened. Without corroborative evidence, you may not really know to any degree of certainty or satisfaction. And at some point, moving on with your life, even without that certainty, or learning to tolerate the uncertainty, is important. And not becoming so preoccupied that recovering the memories and getting the evidence becomes in itself your life.
Dan Brown is convinced that Steve and Diane suffered terrible abuse as children. Their father was the only one who could really set the record straight, but I wasn't yet ready to confront him. First, I needed to find out whether anyone else in the family could substantiate their claims. Steve and Diane have 2 older sisters and a younger brother and sister. I spoke to all of them. Not surprisingly, they were reluctant to speak publicly about their father. But one of the older sisters, Sandy, did agree to go on camera. 4 years ago, when Steve and Diane remembered the murders, she moved from New Jersey to Utah.
Quite often, Stephen and Diane would go to places with my father, and in my mind as a child, I thought they were the favorite children, because why did they always get to go off with Dad somewhere, and I never got to go with him?
Stephen talks about it as though it was a strategy of your father's to keep you all separate.
It would make perfect sense. Military strategy, divide and conquer. Never let one person know what the other person knows, because then they could never get together and say, hey, something's going on here, maybe we should do something about it. Yeah, I could see that.
Have you ever at any stage had a sense that he had killed people?
Yeah, I think I'm sitting on the fence about it right now, because I don't have my own memories to validate. It's a scary thought. It's a real scary thought. And I do remember sitting in the car a lot like this. And my protection was to close my eyes right at the moment something happened. That I learned, somehow or another I learned to just shut my eyes, turn my head, right at the moment something happened. And for everybody else, did you see what happened? No, I didn't see anything, because I would turn my head. Maybe instinctually I knew as a child, so I would never witness anything that was brutal.
Sandy has a terrible childhood memory. It was during the Cold War. She told a friend that her father was a Russian.
Well, soon after that, I was called home. And when I was called home, my father took off his belt and started beating me and told me I was never, ever to tell stories like that again. I remember just, I don't know whether I went unconscious or, you know, what kids do, they leave their body. But I do remember my mother coming in and screaming, you're going to kill her, you're going to kill her. I always had the sense that if we were really bad enough, he would kill us. And I do not have a second thought of that as a child.
There's no more painful childhood memories for Steve and Diane than what happened to them at Fort Devens. I went there with them to the abandoned house they used to live in.
And I do remember Stephen receiving the brunt of the abuse in the family. We were always hearing him get beat or thrown in his room or whatever that would happen, that happened behind closed doors that I knew nothing about, but I knew it was not a good thing. I'm surprised he's still alive, actually.
They locked me in my room here for, I guess, a week, maybe 2. I was allowed to go to school, but when I came home, I had to stay in here. Every day you're just contemplating your mortality, and I remember standing here and looking out the window, and at that moment I said, you know, if I can see myself and as an adult coming back here, that means I can live. You know, maybe that means I'm going to live. And eventually there came a day when I did. I came and I stood out there and looked up at this window and saw myself as a boy.
And for me, it was always something very violent. If, as a child, I couldn't even deem it as sexual abuse, because I really don't want to talk about what he did to me in Devens Crest, but he didn't use any part of his own body.
My mother protected my father on her deathbed. She would never say anything against him. And I believe that's where her cancer came from, because she was holding all these secrets all these years, and all the grief and the anger and the confusion basically killed her. That's what killed her. The lies she kept to protect my father is what killed her.
I think the core of truth is in the abuse. And I think his memories of being abused, and severely abused, I think those are true. Whether or not all the other details are true, I couldn't say. And the police, that would really be up to the police, and the police may know more than they're telling people.
There are a number of reasons why we're sticking with, not just that the information provided by Mr. Griggs is excruciatingly detailed in its nature, but also that we do have unsolved cases, and we'd like to solve those cases.
Are there other cases where you have stuck with something over the years, in spite of lots of doubts, and it has actually broken in the end?
I think that's true. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I think it's a credit to the individuals who have stuck to it, despite false information, despite of false leads, and I think that's the reason why that door, however slightly ajar, will always be left open for individuals like Stephen Griggs.
But this is not about convincing other people that this happened. To me, it's about going back, remembering, putting it into some kind of order that then I can accept it, that I can deal with it. And that is, for the first time in my life, is a really good feeling to put me first. When you're abused like that, you don't know what me is. You lose that. You lose the concept of that you are important in yourself. And that has come back to me in all of this. And so if it stops now, if nothing else ever happens from this point, it's been invaluable. If more happens, then great. I'm a true believer in the idea of change what you can, identify what you can't, and then find some kind of peace with it. It's a definite philosophy I've had to develop.
I'm going to put all this together in time. If my father dies, it's going to make it that much easier because I don't have to worry about him and what he's going to do next. Anybody who thinks that he's not dangerous because he's an old man should go down in his basement and look at the room that he dug and ask themselves where those 4 or 5 yards of dirt went. He didn't carry them out of there in 5-gallon buckets. They think he's too old to wield a knife. Well, how did he dig that room? He broke through the foundation to dig that room.
We've heard so many childhood memories, memories that are locked in time. Now I have to bring these issues into the present and visit the father.
Hello, Mr. Griggs, are you here?
There was no answer. Maybe he didn't hear me.
Hello, Mr. Griggs.
Hi, my name's John.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's John. This is Miguel.
Hi.
Miguel.
Nice to meet you.
Can we come in and talk to you? We'd just like to come and talk to you for a few minutes.
What?
Can we come in and talk to you for a few minutes?
Yeah, go to that door. I'll open the door.
We're doing a television documentary. We're doing a film.
Television?
It's
Don't make me a star, please. I'm shy. Very shy.
I wanted to. Can we come and sit down and talk to you?
Oh, yeah.
We thought we'd come and find out who you really are, because what Stephen says, you know, he says some very serious things, and we wanted to ask you yourself, so that.
Who I'm really, who I really am.
Do you know what he's been saying? Have you heard what he's been saying?
I don't know what I'm really are.
He says that you've. He says very serious things about you. He says that you killed people when he was a child.
Me? No, something I don't know. I'm two people.
That you killed people. Do you know why he would say that?
No. I have no idea what was he saying. What is that that he's saying?
You know, he's told the police, he's told the army, and he's told us, we're from television, that you killed and buried people at Fort Devens.
I killed people at Fort Evans. Fort Evans?
Yeah.
I killed people. Oh, no.
Yeah. That you killed one of the children of one of the cooks, a black child of one of the cooks.
Oh, no.
In front of him and his sister, Diane.
Oh, no. 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 I don't know where you get that idea from. I still vaguely trying to put this picture together. What are you telling me? But I don't know what it is.
It's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. What was he bidding on me?
He says you used to go on journeys with him and Diane, your daughter. They used to take Steve and Diane on journeys, and you would kidnap and kill people.
And Diane?
And Diane with you as well.
Well, I have to talk to Diane about that.
15 minutes later, he admitted he already knew about his children's claims.
When Stephen threw those bunch of lies on me, I'd kind of disown him. You can't be my son. She told me that when they're going to put you in jail, that the niggers will do this and that to you, and described all terrible things for me.
He told you that?
Yeah. When they put me in jail, he's going to work at it to put me in jail. That was 3-4 years ago now.
Well, since then, he's been saying, my father was a serial killer. He says you have things buried in the basement, that you have skulls in the basement.
Oh, yeah. I rebuilt the basement. Yeah, they sent somebody over to check what I'm digging in the basement. I dug in the basement because this house set on the gravel, sand, gravel that mixed with the cement. I'll take you down before you leave and show you what he's talking about.
But can I just ask you...
Would you care to go now, Dan Styler?
Just to ask you something else first. One thing that's been said, Stephen and Diane may have suffered as children. They may have been badly treated as children. Did you abuse them when they were children?
Abuse? No, I never abused any children, no. No, I wasn't a great lover like I told my children. I was raised alone. My mother was a little bit mean with me. Whenever I did something wrong, I got a little beaten with a branch of wood. And that branch of wood, I can still see was stuck in the air. I said, next time you do something like that, whatever I did, I don't remember, you'll get that branch of wood again. I got swapped a few times, but that was my mother only.
How did you treat Diane when she was little? Because she says you treated her badly, that you abused her. She says you put her in the trunk of the car when she was a little girl. Huh. And you left her out in the woods. She says...
Left her out in the woods? Oh, boy.
She says you hurt her.
Oh, no, that's... How'd she get those stories? I don't know. Left her in the woods. And she found her way back.
And she says you abused her. And she says you sexually abused her.
Well, this is something I don't know what to think about it, to say about it. None of them are true. I didn't do nothing bad to them, children. We ate. I would go to commissariat in Fort Monmouth, bring the food that they like to eat. My wife cooked it for them. There was no abuse whatsoever.
Well, thank you very much for making that very, very clear.
Would you like to see my cellar?
Yes, please.
It's not in good condition right now, but it's give you an idea what I'm doing. Well, the light is down here, so last step because I'm trying to. Oh, I got a water drip. This was a soft dirt, and the dirt was kind of falling in. So I got me some concrete blocks for footing, and then I got those balls from what used to be dance land. They used to throw out these bottles because they're not returnable.
So there isn't anything behind the bottles, though?
No. No.
They're not hiding...
No, no. This house is built to withstand a hurricane. All corners are built from 4x4s with 2x4 alongside of it to make a corner, you know what I'm talking about. And hurricane come along and rip that top hole off. I still can hide in here and survive. This is a strong place, strongest place.
Do you think you'd survive your son if he came down here?
Yeah. I don't know about him now. I didn't think it would turn out to be what it turned out to be. I have no fear of anything. Nobody can pin anything on me but tell me, oh, you do this, you did that. I have no fear at all.
I have a portrait on my wall.
So the old man is an innocent victim of his children's bitterness? Is that the story?
What am I?
Yet he'd lied to us about being surprised at the allegations. And if the experts we spoke to are to be believed, he lied about the abuse as well. But murder?
What am I?
I set out on this film hoping that I might uncover the truth. Is Steve and Diane's father a serial killer? Instead, it has been a journey that has taken us into the dark heart of an American family, into terrible memories, psychology and trauma. But the truth remains elusive. A few days after my interview with him, the police also went to question Mr. Griggs Sr. and then called me up. What do you make of him, John? They wanted to know. I suggested they watch this film.
I thought he wouldn't escape. He got out. We live in a cemetery. Cold and barren place. And science runs with us, making us gods. The rules are all wrong. Every perversion is justified. The art people eat dead bodies.